A man once told me that life is like walking through a mountain range. Some men spend their lives looking up, others spend their lives looking down. The man who is always looking down sees the valleys. Perhaps he has been through one before. Something happened to him there, something painful enough that he never wants to experience it again. So even when the Lord brings him to a beautiful place, he cannot enjoy it. He stands on the peak looking over the edge, already dreading the descent. He is always waiting for something to go wrong. Eventually, fear begins to shape the way he sees everything. He becomes anxious and discouraged. He begins to feel as though life is something being done to him rather than something he is actually living. He cannot enjoy today because he is terrified of tomorrow. His problem is easy to recognize. But there is another man whose problem is harder to see because, at first, he appears to be doing very well. This man is always looking up. He sees the peaks in the distance and wants to climb them. He is hopeful, ambitious, energetic, and optimistic. When other men see obstacles, he sees opportunities. There is nothing wrong with climbing mountains. The problem is that somewhere along the way, he begins to believe that real life happens on the peaks. He reaches one summit and enjoys it for a moment, but then he looks across the horizon and sees another. There, that will be the one. So he starts climbing again. After enough years of doing this, however, he begins to notice something frustrating. Mountains are mostly not mountaintops. Most of the journey is the trail between them. There are long climbs, slow descents, switchbacks, forests, rocky stretches, ordinary miles, and places where you cannot even see the summit. He begins to resent those miles. He wants to get through them faster. He looks for shortcuts. He pushes himself harder. He becomes restless with ordinary life because ordinary life feels like something standing between him and the life he actually wants. This is the man who is always chasing the dream. When I accomplish this, when I make this much money, when the business reaches this point, when I get that house, when my circumstances finally change, when I reach that next peak, then I will be happy. Without realizing it, he spends his entire life living in the future. Eventually and inevitably, burnout finds him. Burnout is not always simply the result of doing too much. Sometimes burnout is what happens when our expectations of what life should have been collide with the life God has actually given us. Some peaks never come. Some take much longer than expected. And perhaps most painfully, some peaks are finally reached only for the man to discover that the view cannot satisfy him the way he imagined it would. So he immediately needs another mountain. Eventually, the man who spends his life looking up can become just as miserable and bitter as the man who spends his life looking down. One is terrified of what tomorrow might bring. The other is convinced tomorrow will finally bring what he needs. Neither man knows how to receive today. And there is another danger for the man who lives for the peaks. If happiness exists only at the summit, then every descent feels like losing happiness. The valleys seem impossibly far below him, so he must keep climbing. Peak to peak, success to success, experience to experience, achievement to achievement, always pressing forward because he is terrified that if he stops climbing, he will begin falling. Eventually, he cannot maintain it, and the man who spent his whole life trying to escape the valley collapses into it. But there is a third man, the wise man. The wise man learns to walk the trail. He still climbs mountains, he still has hopes, he still works hard, he still dreams about what may be over the next ridge, and he still walks through valleys. Some of them hurt, some frighten him. Some are so dark that he cannot understand why the trail has led him there. But he has learned something the other two men have not. The trail belongs to the Lord. The Lord does not merely wait for him at the summit. The Lord leads him along the way. So instead of constantly asking, "How quickly can I get somewhere else?" he learns to ask, "Lord, how would you have me walk here?" If the Lord leads him upward, he climbs. If the Lord leads him downward, he descends. If the Lord keeps him on a long stretch of ordinary ground, he walks. And if the Lord allows him to stand on a summit, he stops and gives thanks for the view. The wise man's contentment does not come from convincing himself that every part of the trail is equally pleasant. It isn't. His contentment comes from knowing that his happiness is not ultimately determined by where he stands on the mountain, but by who walks with him. That changes the entire landscape. The valley is still a valley, but it is no longer infinitely far from happiness because God is there. The ordinary trail is still ordinary, but it is no longer wasted time because God is there. And the peak is still glorious, but now it can actually be enjoyed because he no longer needs it to save him. He can receive the summit as a gift instead of demanding it become his home. And when it is time to descend, he can descend. Because the God who was Lord on the mountain is still Lord in the valley. Eventually, the wise man looks back over the miles he has traveled and realizes something the other two men missed. The trail was his life. The ordinary mornings, the work, the meals, the conversations, raising children, loving his wife, serving his neighbor, worshipping with the saints, laughing with friends, waiting, praying, failing, repenting, forgiving, being forgiven, working with his hands, going to bed tired, and waking up to do it again. Those things were never merely the miles between the important moments. Those were the important moments. The man staring into the valley missed them because he was afraid. The man staring toward the summit missed them because he was restless. But the man who followed the Lord received them because he understood that he did not need to be somewhere else in order for his life to matter. He could faithfully receive the place God had given him today. And perhaps that is contentment, not having no desire for another mountain, and not pretending there are no valleys, but trusting the Lord enough to walk faithfully wherever he has placed your feet. The foolish man says, "I will be happy when I finally get there." The fearful man says, "I could be happy if I knew I would never go down there." But the wise man says, "The Lord is my shepherd, wherever he leads me I will walk." And because of that, he discovers something the other two men spend their lives searching for. He can be happy on the journey. He can rejoice on the peaks. He can endure the valleys. And he does not have to spend his life wishing he was somewhere else